Hi everyone, and welcome to this chapter of the free full stack course. As you've noticed, and as I've mentioned before in my YouTube channel, from the beginning of this chapter and for all the other videos that I'm going to upload for the free full stack course, I'm trying a little bit of a different method for the recording process. I've been using a third-party application for recording a third-party website for recording all my videos up to this point. However, I'm switching to more of a native solution using Ops Studio. And I just wanted to mention that if the layout is a little bit different, that is the reason why. And we're also going to get rid of the titles at the bottom of the screen. And I'm just going to provide some time stamps in the YouTube videos for so that you can actually click on the timestamps to end up on the actual sections of the videos. So let's get started. In this video, what we're going to do is to focus on developing the category and the products for our backend. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the course, what we are going to do is to develop some sort of like a shop, like an e-commerce solution with APIs. We're not going to develop a website, but we're actually going to deliver REST APIs for our users so that we can hit those REST APIs with our Flutter application and also with our Rust application from the terminal. So what we're gonna go ahead and do in this video is to work on the data models for products and also for product categories. Now, before we actually talk about storing the data for products and product categories, let's talk about Django users. And actually, I'm not talking about really, for instance, your Postgres user or anything like that, but I'm actually talking about when you have a Django application, then there could be users that are going to register in Django itself. So if you think about your data model, and how, for instance, you can have, if you thought about our e-commerce solution, you can think also about users that are going to register themselves in that e-commerce solution and like make purchases by registering their emails, for instance, and also setting a password. Now, this data has to be stored somewhere, and that somewhere is the database that you've chosen for your Django solution. In the previous videos, we saw that we set the database as our, we set the database as Postgres. So if we go here to settings pie in here, we could see that our database was stored somewhere in here. As you can see in here, we have the full stack course as the name of the database, and then the user to log into Postgres was full stack course as well, and the password was full stack course. So our database name is actually called full stack course. So users for our Django backend are going to be stored in this particular database that is mentioned here in the databases section of our settings pie. So if you want to see the number of users at the moment registered in this database, you can actually log into Postgres to have a look at that. But I have to tell you that at the moment, the number of users in our backend solution should actually be 0 because we don't actually have any admin or super users. So let's have a look at that. Let's see if we can demonstrate that. So I'm going to go to iTerm here, bring my terminal up to the screen and make sure that the font is large enough. Okay. So let's go ahead and say that we want to log into Postgres. So let's say PSQL with the user of, we're going to go with full stack course. Okay. Let's see. I think it was with a capital U. Yes. So if we have a look at our connection, we can see that we're connected to full stack course as a user full stack course as well. So this is us at the moment logging to Postgres with our users and connected to our database, which was basically mentioned in here. So if you then have a look at your tables, you can see that there's an auth user table right here. I don't have to worry about this being obstructed by the titles anymore. So this feels really good. So you can see my entire screen. So we have auth user in here. Now, what we could do is to go and say select all from auth user in here, auth user, And what you'll see in here, you see all the columns, ID, password, last login, but at the moment, this table is empty, and that's what you should be expecting. So there are no users really stored at the moment in the database for our backend solution. After double checking that there are no users stored in your Postgres instance for your backend, we can basically quit Postgres at this point. So we don't need to actually be logged in here. So I'm just going to do a queue in here and we've quit Postgres. Okay. But I'm just going to keep the terminal in here just so that we can come back to it later. Now let's go to Visual Studio Code in here, and we're going to start creating a super user. Now, a super user in Django is something that you will be working with even if you're creating websites with Django. And a super user is a user, as its name indicates, that has superpowers. So this user has the ability to manipulate data, to create tables, to pretty much do anything with the database and with your data models, and also do migrations. We'll talk more about migrations soon, so don't worry about that. But now that we want to go ahead and, for instance, create products and product categories, we need something called a super user. And there is a way to actually do that with Django. I'm just going to show you how to do that. So what you need to do in here, let's go ahead and see if we can bring up terminal. So I'm going to get rid of the Explorer in here, and let's go to terminal, and let's ensure that your virtual environment is active as well. So you need to be on Python 3.10, I believe. So let's say Python version. And we're on 3.10 at the moment, but maybe you've chosen another Python version for your virtual environment, but just make sure that you've activated your virtual environment before you do anything else in here, okay? So what we're gonna do in here is to go ahead and create a super user. So the way to do that is to type Python, and then you say manage.py, and then we say create super user, just like that. So that's the command that you have to issue, okay? So then it's gonna ask for username. What we're gonna do in here, just to make sure that by me talking about a super user, that you also sitting at home or at your office or wherever you're watching this video from, then you have the same user. So just to make sure that you're not going to get confused in the future when I talk about a super user, let's everyone watching this video call their super users admin. Okay, so we're going to call it admin in here. For the email, I'm just going to say admin@admin.com. You could do that too. And then password's also going to be admin. And then admin. Since this password's too weak, then we're going to get a warning from Django saying that this is not a good password. Are you sure you want to do that? Then we're just going to say press yes here. So now we've created a super user for our database, and we could actually double check that in the database if we want to. So let's log into Postgres again and double check this fact that our super user is being created. So I'm going to bring up terminal, and let's connect to Postgres, and let's do a select statement in here. And now that we've done that, you could see a user that has been created in our database. For you can see in here there is information admin@admin.com. So that is basically the user that we created for basically our super user that has been stored then in the database successfully, and that database's information is in our settings.py file. After double checking this, we can quit Postgres again, but it's usually a good idea just to keep it here. And to be honest with you, some of you may actually prefer to have Postgres connected. So I quit it sometimes, but you could just get back to it as fast as just with a PSQL command. But if you don't want to do this, you could just leave Postgres on. So just connect to it and leave it here as well. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the admin interface in Django. What you may have noticed is that Django allows you to manage your database models from Django. So when we'll talk about creating like products and product categories, these objects will be stored in the database, of course. However, they will be managed through Django's object relation management, and also through Django's own web interface. So Django will provide you with a web interface, which is your admin interface. And through that admin interface, you can then manage your model objects. And we could actually have a look at our admin interface right now. So let's go to our solution again in here, and let's ensure that our server is running. So let's just say run server, Python manage py run server, and this is gonna then run our server. So let's have a look at our browser. So let's go ahead then and open our website. As you can see, the address for our website is written in here. So I'm just going to copy this and bring it to Safari and paste it right there. You can see when we go here, we actually get an error saying that this page doesn't exist, and that's quite fine. This is because we haven't configured our URLs yet. But what you're going to have to do is to go in here and say /admin. Then you can see you get to Django's administration page, and in here, then you're able to type admin, and your password was also admin, and then a login to your admin interface. And this is the typical admin interface for Django, which looks like this, but if you enlarge it, looks a little bit different, but it is quite, it's basically adaptive to your font size and screen size as well. So it kind of looks like this. As you can see at the moment, there are groups and users that you can manage. So if you click on users, you can see an admin user placed in here. Looks a little bit better when it's not too zoomed in, as you can see in here. So you have the admin, and then you have groups as well, which we're not going to talk about right now. So this is the typical Django admin interface. As I mentioned before, when we talk about tables in a database, let's say a product table or a product category table, these tables inside Django are managed through code. So you don't go ahead and create a table by logging into Postgres. You actually create your tables by creating model objects inside Django. So just remember, when we talk about model objects, we're kind of talking about objects that you can work with through the Django admin interface, and also those model objects are stored in your database, which you've connected to your Django application from the settings.py file. And now that we're going to go and create products and product categories, it's time to actually create a products application. Now, applications are, I don't want you to think of applications in terms of like a Flutter application or a front end application. But when we were talking about Django, Django has its own structure for how you create websites or you create REST APIs. So what you need to keep in mind is that a backend solution could get big really fast. So if you're creating an e-commerce application, you want to, for instance, separate different bits of logic of your backend into applications. So when we're talking about authentication and user management, you could have an application inside your backend called auth, for instance. When it comes to product management, like the products, product categories, etc., you could have an application called products. Or when you're, for instance, talking about your basket, like your shopping basket, when you're adding products to your shopping basket and then checking out, you could call that, for instance, shop or something like that, or check out, whatever you want. So you want to separate different bits of logic inside your application inside your Django backend into applications. And since we're now going to go ahead and create products and product categories, we need to create a product application for our backend. So we're going to actually call it products. Okay, so let's go to Visual Studio Code in here and stop the server running. And then we're going to create an application. So it's called Start App in here, you can see. And the way to do that is using a command called Django admin. And you have access to the command Django admin simply because you're right now inside a virtual environment in which you've installed Django. So when you create your virtual environment, we created with a PyEnv. And if you're on Windows, I believe the virtual environment support on PyEnv fork doesn't work so well, so you actually have to use Python for that. But anyways, if you have a virtual environment and you've installed Django, then you get access to a command called Django admin as well in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and type Django admin with a dash in between the words, and then you say start app, which is the command that you pass to Django admin. And in here, you basically tell it to create a new application called products. So let's go ahead and do that. And that command goes really, really fast. And if you go to your file explorer now, you can see you have your backend, and then you have a whole new folder in here, which is called products. In there, there's like different files, which is the init file, which makes the products folder a module. You have the admin, apps, models, tests, and views. So quite a lot of files in there, and we can close the settings py file as well. So now you've created your products app, and we're going to go and develop our models on top of the products app. Before we continue with the creation of our model object, let's pin this term of our models, our applications. So an application in Django has really nothing to do with REST APIs per se. So if you think that by creating a products application, now all of a sudden we're going to have a products REST API by default, that can't be farther from the truth. So applications are just a logical way of managing models and the relation between the models without polluting your main application, which in this case is called backend. Okay, so you don't want to put all the logic inside a backend, just like you wouldn't want to put all the logic for your Flutter application, for instance, in one Dart file. Or the same thing is true for pretty much any other big solution, whether you write it in Swift, Kotlin, Dart, Rust, JavaScript. You want to basically separate the logic. And in here, creating applications in Django is the correct way of separating the logic between different parts of your backend solution. So now that we're going to go and work with Django models, let's go ahead and do a little bit of a side project right here and do a backup of our database. As we're working with our models at the moment, there may be points where you wish you actually didn't make a specific change to your database. For instance, if you created a model object which you can't reverse, then it is actually good to have backups of our database. And it's generally a good idea to also understand how Postgres backs up database and also can restore databases. So let's have a look at that. So what we're going to do in here is to create a folder inside our main folder in here, which is I think I've called course backend, but for you, this folder maybe called something else. So what I'm going to do is to open this folder right now, and actually maybe in here, I don't have to even open it in Finder. We could go ahead and create a new folder in here and call it db backups. Okay, so db-backups. And what we're going to do is to use a command in terminal to dump the contents of our full stack course database as a tar file inside this folder. So as we'll go through the course, there will be specific points that will ask you to make a dump of your database and basically save it into DB backups. And we're going to ignore this file, so we're not going to check it into our GitHub repository either. So let's go ahead, before we forget, we're going to ignore this DB backups folder entirely. So let's open git ignore file. And at the end of this, I'm just going to say DB backups folder is entirely ignored. Okay, so somewhere here, we're going to say DB backups completely is ignored from being checked into our GitHub source control, basically. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and make a backup of our Postgres database, basically. So the way to do that is using a command called pgdump. And remember, this pgdump is a command that you run from your terminal. So this is not a command that you run from Postgres. So you shouldn't be logged into Postgres. This is something that I've seen a lot of developers do. They log into Postgres first, and then they try to do a Postgres dump. And that just gives you an error saying that this command isn't identified in Postgres. So make sure you're not logged into Postgres in that terminal session when you issue this command. Okay, so what we're going to do in here is to say pgdump, okay, and then you specify the format for your dump, and I believe it is capital F, and we'll correct this if it's not the correct format. Then after this, you say T, which is for tar, which is basically like a compressed format. And then we'll specify the database name, which is full stack course. Okay, and then after you specify that, you specify the greater than sign, kind of like a pipe, not really a pipe, but you're actually sending the output of this to a file. Then we're going to say db backups folder slash full stack course -1.tar. Okay, so let's do that. And now you can see that there is a tar file created in db backups folder. And this is actually a backup of your full stack course database in Postgres, which is fully stored in here. And this is going to be very useful for us later if we do make any mistakes during the migration of our model objects or creation of our model objects. It's always good to have backups. And this is one way that you can make backups of your Postgres database. After creating this backup, we're also going to have to go and add the products application to our backend. So just because we've created an app, it doesn't mean that Django understands where this app sits or how this app is related to the entire backend solution. Remember, we're going to create some REST APIs, and those REST APIs, we're going to separate them into different applications. And we need to kind of tell Django that, hey, we actually have these applications, because just because you create applications, it doesn't necessarily mean that Django understands about them and where they sit. So if you look in here, then if you look in your products, you can see in products there is a file in here which is called apps. And if you go into apps, then there is a method in here, sorry, a class in here called products config. So what we're going to do is to keep this here, and then let's go and open settings.py. And in settings, what you need to do is to find a section of settings which is called installed apps, as you can see in here. And at the end of this, I need you to just go ahead and create a new item. And we're going to say products and then .apps.products config, which is the name of this class. Okay, so by doing this, you're basically telling Django that, hey, I have now a new application called products, and if I make some changes inside the products app, I actually want you to take those into consideration. And changes, I mean, like for instance, if you go and create a new model object, and if you tell Django to apply your migrations or do your migrations, then Django is going to first have a look at all your installed applications, be like, oh, here's a products application. I'm going to go into products applications and model files, models, .py file, and if there are any models in here, I'm actually going to create migrations for them and save them in the database. So it's very important to put your applications inside installed apps, otherwise Django won't even know about them. After talking about installing the products app, we also need to talk a little bit more about model objects. I touched upon this a little bit earlier, but let's go a little bit more into details about it. So when you're talking about database objects and tables, you may be thinking that we're going to go into Postgres and create a table with relations and like foreign keys, primary keys, and etc. However, with Django, you don't necessarily actually have to know SQL, but I always tell people that I'm teaching about Django that although you may not completely need to learn about SQL when you're working with Django, because it has a great abstraction level layer on top of SQL, but it's always a desired skill. If you know SQL, you can get really far in your career as a backend developer or REST API developer, whatever you want to call it. So it's always a good idea to know SQL if you're a software engineer, even if you're working with Flutter or just like very high level frameworks like Swift UI, you still sometimes may need to know how databases work. And it's always a good idea basically to learn SQL. So going back to model objects, Django tries to abstract away the creation and working with all these database commands. So you pretty much don't really need to work with SQL when you're working with Django, but there will be times that you wish you knew actually SQL, because Django tries to bridge your model objects into your backend, into your database, whether your database is Postgres or MySQL or whatever, or MongoDB. So there are bridges. So if you think that this is your database Postgres, we're at the moment, if you remember, we're using a bridge for working with our Postgres. So we actually wrote that bridge in here. Psych up, okay? So this is the bridge that is actually translating the commands that we provide to Django into Postgres related commands. So if you, for instance, go ahead and create a model object that has an array field, then scopg will understand, oh, an array field in Django will be translated to this type of SQL command in Postgres. Okay, so that's how model objects work. We specify at a high level what we want in Django and in Python using Python language, and then the engine of our database understands, okay, this particular model object or field translates to Postgres with this SQL command. Okay, so model objects are very high level abstraction of database commands and tables, you could say. Now that we've talked about that, let's actually go ahead and create or start working on the model objects for products and for product in our backend and a product category. So if you go in here, so let's actually close up this backend folder in here and close all these files that we have open. Let's go ahead inside the products folder and then inside models py file in here. So this is important. So if you do command P or control P in Windows and Linux and type models.py, you will find it. You can see it's inside the products folder. Okay, so that's basically us trying to work on the product and the product category model by going into models py file inside the products application. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do in here is to do some imports. So I want you to just type what I'm typing in here and I will explain what they actually do. So we're going to say from Django.utils translations import get text lazy as underscore. So what this does is, what we're going to do soon is when we create a product model object, we will also create a field for its price. And the price of a product is going to have a currency, because we always have to have a currency when we're talking about a price. For instance, 10 Swedish crowns translates roughly to $1. So if I just type 1 as the price, we don't really know which currency it is in. And this type of import that I've written in here is going to help us to specify that, okay, $1 may have the sign of USD in the database, but in the admin interface, that USD symbol needs to be presented as United States dollars, or Swedish crowns is usually written as SEK, but in the admin interface, the translation for that is going to be Swedish crowns. So this import is going to help us to actually specify the text that the admin has to see, or the admin sees when they log into the admin interface, instead of seeing the symbol for things. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but I think that's like the easiest explanation I can come up with right now. Now, we're also going to work with something called product variations. You may have, like, if you've logged into some modern websites for e-commerce recently, you can, for instance, search for iPhone 13 Pro Max, and there's just one product. If you just go into iPhone 13 Pro Max, then you can see the different variations of iPhone 13 Pro Max, and this the same is true for Apple's website. So Apple doesn't list iPhone 13 Pro Max Blue as its own product, and then, for instance, the gold as its own product. It's just one iPhone 13 Pro Max. And then when you go into that product, then you can see the different variations of it. For instance, with the 512 gigabytes storage, 1 terabyte storage. So these are like the configuration options for that product. So what we're going to do in our backend and for our REST APIs is we're going to provide, when you call a REST API to grab like a product and its information, we're also going to provide you with an array of related products and their IDs. And for that, we have to actually have support for arrays. And some databases such as SQLite, they don't support arrays natively, but Postgres does. And in order to work with arrays, we're going to go ahead and do an import in here so that we can work with arrays in Postgres. So let's say from Django.contrib.postgres import fields, and then we're going to use it as post Postgres fields. So this is just an alias that we're giving to this particular import. Later we can say Postgres fields dot, and then we say array field. Okay, so don't worry about that. These are just imports that we have so far written in our models.py file inside the products application. With these imports in place, we're going to go ahead and create our first model object. And this is a very exciting point actually in this course, because we're getting very, very real right now. We're getting to like the point that we actually have model objects, which we can then export to our REST API. So let's go ahead and see how we can create a simple model object. So we say class, and after this class, so every model object in Python is actually a, oh my God, that was GitHub Copilot giving me a whole products class, but I don't want that right now. So, how you create model objects in Django is you specify them with classes, and then so you create a class per model object, and then you say that class is a model class as well. So let's say product category, okay, and then we say models.model. So this is how you would create a class representation of a model object. And this will then be, after you do your migrations, this class will then be translated in some SQL commands that your database backend, in this case psychopg, understands and can translate into SQL commands then that Postgres understands. Okay, so let's go ahead in here and specify the fields or the columns for our model object. So we're going to say we have a name, and you can see in here we say models.char field. Okay, and we say max length is, let's say the max length is 256. Okay, so what we did in here, we said that we have a char field a field char field or a column in the database for this particular table, which is called product category. Okay, and then this is how you basically specify your fields for your model object. So let's create another one, and we're going to say every category can also have an icon. So if the UI, for instance, our Flutter application later wants to display the categories and their icons, so it's just not boring names, but you can actually have an icon, we're going to go ahead and specify an icon URL per category. So let's say icon URL in here, and then we say this is a models.url field with the actually max length isn't necessary, but we're going to say blank is equal to true in here. So we basically created a URL field, which has to always be a valid URL. There will be validations specified or applied to this URL field. So you can't just type anything in here. It actually has to be a valid URL. Okay. Otherwise we could just say this is also a char field. All right. Now we're going to also add a description to it. So we're going to say a description is a text field. So let's say description is models.text field. Okay, and we just create a text field in here. And when we don't say blank is true, that simply means that this field is required. So if you see blank equal to true in Django, that simply means that this field is not required. Okay, so it has nothing to do with null values or not null values. It simply means that when you create an instance of this product category and you try to insert it into the database, if you forget to specify the description for that object, it is completely fine, and the object is going to be stored in the database anyways. Okay, so just remember that blank equal to true is mainly for the admin interface when you're creating new objects. If you forget to specify these fields, then Django is not going to complain about that. All right. Now, one thing that we also gonna do is to allow the Flutter application and the Rust application to, for instance, to be able to render some category breadcrumbs. If you're not familiar with breadcrumbs, they're kind of like information that you display like this, like you would say electronics. So if that is one category, then you say computers and the laptop. So this is a typical breadcrumb. You may have seen them in some modern websites, for instance. So this type of breadcrumb is only made possible by having this laptop's product category having a reference to a parent category, and every product category can have a maximum of one other parent category, which is not required, because electronics category doesn't have a parent, meaning that basically it doesn't have a parent. So, and the meaning of it is quite self-explanatory. So what we're going to do in here is to create a field for our product category and model objects, saying that they can actually have a parent category. So this is going to be a foreign key. So let's say parent category, and we're going to say this is model foreign key. Okay, and then we're going to specify the various fields for this. So the first thing that we're going to specify in here, we're going to say this is a foreign key to the self. So it means every parent category has to be of type product category. Okay, then we're going to say it is not required to be specified. Okay, and also it can contain the value of null. So even if you do specify it, you may specify that it doesn't actually have a parent category. So that will be the value of null. Okay, and then if you think about this case, like if you go back to computers and then this computers, laptops, and then Apple. Okay, if you think about this case, laptops will have it will have a relation to its parent category through this field in the database called parent category. So we can always say laptops.parent category, and we can end up with computers. However, by creating this foreign key, how can computers then get access to its children categories? So the way to do that is by creating a reverse relation between the parent and the child by specifying related name in here. Okay, and in here we're going to say children categories. Okay, so then computers is going to have access to its children categories through a new field called related name, called children categories, by specifying this related name property in here. Okay, and then what happens then if someone deletes this computer's parent category? Then if that does happen, what we want is for all children categories to also be deleted. So we want this deletion to cascade. Okay, so let's go ahead and say on delete is equal to models dot cascade. So that's great. Now we have the product category basically in here. Okay, after doing that, what we're also going to do is to create the string definition for our product category. So the string definition is something that your Django admin interface is going to render. So when you store these product categories in the database, how is your Django admin interface is supposed to render these for you? So you will see all your product categories in Django admin interface, but they will just be displayed as a product category 1, product category 2, product. So Django wouldn't know what to actually display. Should it display the name? Should it display the icon URL? It doesn't know that. It is completely up to us as developers of this particular model object to tell Django what it should display in case of rendering an instance of this model object in the database. And the way to do that is by defining a function on your class called __str___. So let's go ahead in here and say str, okay, and then a reference to self in here. It's kind of like Rust. And then in here you would tell Django what property of or how you actually want Django to display. So the result of this is actually a string. And in here, you would tell Django that, hey, I want you to render this particular string. But you could also do some formatting. So you could just say, like, I want to display, you can see in here, this and this and this, and then you would format self, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, but for now, we're just going to display the name of the category as the string representation of this particular category in the admin interface. Okay, good stuff. Now that we have the product category, let's go ahead and implement the product, actually a maker model object. So what we're going to do in here is to create, if you think about our products, we're going to have like iPhones, various iPhones stored in the database. We're going to have various Android phones, many other products, and every one of these products has a maker. So in the case of an iPhone, it is Apple. In the case of like OnePlus Android telephones, it's going to be a company called OnePlus, and etc. So every one of these manufacturers, or actually makers, not manufacturers, they're going to be stored as their own maker instance inside our database, so that we don't duplicate the name of Apple if we have like 2000 iPhones stored in our database. We don't want all of them to have a maker field of type char field that has the same exact value of Apple stored in there. We're just going to create one Apple instance as a maker and then connect these iPhones through a foreign key to their maker. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a maker class. By this point, you should know that maker class, like if we were talking about model objects, then we create a class and then we say maker, we say model in here. Okay, and we're just going to have a name on this. So the name is going to be similar to the name of a product category. So I'm just going to copy that, and we're going to bring it in here, and the name is going to be 512. Okay, but I mean 512 it's arbitrary, to be honest with you. In here it's kind of like random. You can say 512, you can say 10, 20, whatever you think the maximum name of a maker in your system should be, but let's just leave it as 512 in here. Okay, and then we're going to go and do the string representation as well, so that Django admin interface knows how to render this. So name. Okay, and for those of you who are, oh no, semicolons, I kind of switch between Rust and Python and Dart and Swift, quite a lot of languages in JavaScript. So I sometimes do stuff like this, which you shouldn't do, but that's simply because I'm switching too much between languages maybe. So that's the string representation of maker. Okay. After doing that, we're going to go and create our product model object, and this is like the beefiest model object that we're going to create, so hopefully you can hang with me throughout this. So let's create a product in here. We're going to say this is a model object as well. Okay, and what we're going to do as the first part of this model object is to create a new class that represents our currencies. Oh my god. So our currencies, so we say a class of currency, which is inside the product class. So it's kind of like private to the product class, and its type is of models text choices. Okay, and in here what we're going to do is to say Swedish crown as a choice, and we're going to be saying that it is equal, it's a tuple of its representation in the database is written as SEK, but it has a text representation as Swedish krona. As you can see, it is prefixed with that underscore, which is this translation, get text lazy. Okay, so you can actually do translation for this in different languages as well. Okay, so that's that. Let's create American dollar. Let's see if GitHub Copilot can create that for me. That's really good. And we're gonna say euro. Okay, and remember there's no comma between these. It's very important. Then we're going to say pound sterling, GBP, and then pound sterling. Then we're going to say yen, and that is equal to JPY, Japan yen, equal to yen in here. And then Australian dollar, like this. Okay, so it's really good. So now we have our currencies as text choices stored right here. So we haven't really used this currency yet, but we're going to do that soon. So let's go ahead in here and say name is a new field. And as you can see, it has a max length of 512. So every product in our database is going to have a name. Then we're going to have a subtitle, which is also going to be a required field. And we're going to say it has a max length of 512. Then what we're going to do is to say that every product also has a maker. So remember, maker is a model object in here. So let's go ahead and say maker is models.foreign key. Okay, foreign key right here. And then we're going to specify the properties. So we can't say self in here because a maker is not connected to products. So a maker is a maker and not a product. So in here, you have to just specify that it is of type maker. Okay. And then if a maker is deleted, all that maker's products are going to be deleted as well. So cascade on delete. Okay, then we're going to say if the product has a relation to its maker through a maker field, then the maker should also have a reverse relation to all its products using a related name of products. So related name is products. Okay, like this. Then we'll say that in maker, it is not needed, and its value can actually be null as well. So it is not a required field, and its value can actually be null as well. Now, so that's for the maker. After specifying the maker field, we also going to specify the image URL. So some websites allow products to have 5 images, 10 images, 20, but we're just going to limit our products to having a maximum of 4 images, and they're all 4 also optional. So, and these images, we're not going to actually go into the storage points. So we're not actually going to store these images. We're just going to refer to them. So we're just going to store some URLs, and which we can basically get from other websites. Okay. So let's say image1 URL, and we're going to say models.url field, and it can be null as well. So okay, and I'm just going to copy paste this 4 times. Let's go in here and say 2, 3, and 4. So now we have our images in here. Okay, now we're going to get to the price. So we say every product also has a price, and we say that the price is actually a decimal field, max digits 10, and decimal places 2. This is actually a pretty good suggestion by GitHub Copilot. So this basically ensures that you can store basically a maximum digits of 10, and then you store basically also 2 decimal places. So if the price, for instance, is $12 point 356, we just store 3.6 basically .36, something like that. So I mean, like if you say 10.356 is actually the price, what will be stored in the database will be 10.36, probably, just to round this up as well. So 5.6 becomes 6 in here. Okay, or if it was 350 or 351, it would just be 3.5 in the database. So that's what decimal places does. All right. Okay, that's that. However, now that we have the price, we also have to have the currency. So remember, we had a currency class in here, which is text choices. Let's go and refer to that in here. So we're going to say currency is models char field, and we're going to refer to our currency in here. Okay, so we're going to say max length. Max length is 3, because every currency is represented by 3 characters in here. If you remember, in Swedish krona, it's SEK, USD, EUR, GBP, JPY, and AUD. So the max length is 3. Okay, and then we're going to say our choices are actually currency choices. Okay, so our currency, by making it a text choices model field, gets a property called choices, which will be all these choices that we specified in here. Okay, so currency.choices, and then we're going to say the default is actually currency.American dollar. Okay, so that's our price and the currency. Great stuff. Now, the last field that we have to specify is variation product IDs, which is what I talked about a little bit earlier. So every product can have different variations, like an iPhone 13 Pro Max can have a variation of iPhone 13 Pro Max Sierra Blue, 512 gigabytes, etc., etc. Okay, so let's say variation product IDs, and this is why we needed this particular import Postgres fields. So let's go ahead and say it is equal to Postgres field.array field, because as I mentioned, some database engines don't support, or some actually like SQLs, they don't support array fields such as SQLite, but Postgres has support for arrays. So we're going to say it's an array field, and every item inside the array field is an integer, models.integer field. Okay, and null is true, and blank is also true. So it's going to be the product identifiers. Okay, and then we're going to say it's not true and blank also true in here. Okay, now that we've done that, we are also going to go ahead and define the string representation of all our products. So let's say def str self in here. Okay, and then we're going to do some formatting in here. This is a typical way of doing formatting in Python. Then we say self.title. Okay, then we're also going to say self subtitle and self.maker. And when we string format our maker, the string function on our maker is also going to be called to do the representation of the maker as a string inside the string representation of every product. Okay, so great stuff. And now we're pretty much done with the creation of our first snapshot of models actually. Having done all of this work, then it is actually time to go and register these model objects with the admin interface. You see, by just creating stuff in Django, by this point, you should have actually understood that by just creating things, it doesn't necessarily mean that Django is going to pick up on them. So just because we created a products application, it didn't mean that Django understood that that application is available inside our backend. We had to go to the settings py file and add that application within the installed apps property in here. Okay, we had to add this products in here. Just like that, simply by creating model objects in here, it doesn't mean that Django is going to create these inside your database for you. What you need to do is to go inside the application that owns those model objects, in this case the products application, go inside its admin.py file, and you have to register those model objects. So let's say from .models, which is the models folder in the current folder, import everything, and then we're going to say admin site.register product category, then admin site register maker, and admin site register product. And if you're curious why I'm seeing all these suggestions in here and I can just press tab and accept these, it's simply because GitHub Copilot is helping me quite a lot. And I do appreciate that simply because it makes my life a lot easier, so I don't have to take too many notes, which is a tedious task as well. Okay, so now we have our product category maker and product model objects registered in the admin py file. So what we need to do now is to go and make our migrations and then do a migration so that these model objects will be created in Postgres for us. So let's say Python manage.py make migrations. Okay, and you can see maker, product category, and product were picked, and then we will say migrate. Okay, boom. So now is a new migration automatically then created for us. With all this done, it is time to go ahead and actually run our server and give it a whirl and have a look at our admin interface. So let's make sure run server is executed. Then we're going to go to our browser, Safari in this case, and I'm just going to do a refresh. And now you can see makers, product categories, and products are displayed in here. And what we're going to do is to go ahead and actually populate these. We're going to populate these with some basic categories first. So let's go to product categories and add 3 categories in here. So let's go in here, product categories. Then we're going to say add product category. And the first category is going to be electronics. Okay, it has no icon, and let's just for its description say electronics as well. Okay, and electronics doesn't have any parent category. It's actually a top category of its own. After doing that, after basically entering electronics in here, we're going to go ahead and create cell phones under electronics. So let's go and say save and add another. So electronics has been added now to our database. Then we're going to say cell phones like this. I'm just going to copy that and print it, place it in the description as well. And then we're going to say cell phones has a parent category of electronics. Okay, and then save and add another. Then in here, I'm going to say iPhone. And iPhone has a parent category of cell phones, which itself has a parent category of electronics. After adding iPhone to cell phones, I'm going to add also OnePlus in here. Okay, and OnePlus is also going to be having the parent category of cell phones. Okay, so those are our categories. And as you can see in here, now that we have product categories, we have 4 of them. You can see them displayed in here: OnePlus, iPhone, cell phones, electronics. You can do a little bit of an experimentation of changing your models py and going to product category and like removing the string representation. So if I comment this code out and save my file and go in here and refresh, you can see all of a sudden product category object 1, 2, 3, 4 are displayed. So there is no string representation for them. But if you bring back the str function, then you can see that their string representation is currently or correctly rendered on the screen. Okay, Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and add an iPhone and a OnePlus to phone to our products in here. Okay, so let's go into products and then press the add product button in here. And then we're going to go first add iPhone 13 Pro Max. It doesn't really matter which one we add. And then we're going to also add OnePlus 10 Pro to our product. So the way I usually do this is I go to Best Buy, because Best Buy has like really good images, and we can actually extract the image URLs as well in here. So let's go to Best Buy, and then we're going to say we're in the United States. And after that, I'm just going to say don't allow accessing my location. Then I'm going to say iPhone, iPhone 13 Pro Max in here. Okay, so let's go in there. And having iPhone 13 Pro Max, we can just take the Sierra blue one in here. No thanks, please go away. And let's go in here. Okay, and then we're gonna take iPhone 13 Pro Max, this one, and then I'm just gonna paste it in there. And the subtitle is just gonna be what? Sierra blue. Okay, let's just take Sierra blue. And then we're gonna say we don't have a maker, but we're gonna create a maker. So press this plus button in here, and we say the maker is actually Apple. Okay, and save it. Now we say the image URL. Let's just click on this image. And once the image is loaded, I'm just going to right click it and say copy image address and bring it here. Let's go to the second image and do the same thing. Copy image address. Okay, bring it here. And the third one. And then we have one more after this. So copy image address in here. And then we go to the fourth one. And remember, we actually specified that our image image URLs aren't required, so we don't have to specify them, but it's actually nice later when we hit these APIs then, which we haven't written yet, but when we hit our APIs, it is nice to have some images in there so that our Flutter application can actually render those images in its UI. The price we're going to say is 1,000 American dollars, and there are no product variations at the moment. Okay, so we're going to say save and add another. Oops. Has no attribute title. Oh, I see. If we get an error like this, simply means that in somewhere inside our string representation of that product, we're using something called a title, which the product object doesn't have. So let's go to our Python code inside models.py, have a look at product and its string representation. You can see we're using a title attribute, but we don't have title. We actually have name. So then the question is, should we actually have title or name? So let's change this name in here to title. Okay, so we have title and subtitle. Now this is the interesting part. Now that we have changed the name field to title, we may actually need to run our migrations, because we may have to tell Python that, hey, we actually changed a field in the database from name to title. So stop your server in here, and then let's say make migrations. Okay, it says no changes detected. Oh, because I hadn't saved that file. So make sure that you save your models.py file. And now you can see the make migration says, oh, did you rename name to title? And then I'm going to say yes in here. Okay, and then I'm going to say migrate. All right, so it's done our migrations. Then after doing that, what we're going to do is to run our server, run server. And let's just go back in here and hope that we can just press the save button and everything will work. Otherwise, we have to enter all of this information again. Save and add another. Okay, now we have title. That's really good. So we can just correct that problem. So let's go to title in here, grab it, iPhone 13 Pro, 5G, like this. I'm not going to take the actual 256 gigabytes as the title. Okay. And we can also remove the 5G as well. So it's just we have one product called iPhone 13 Pro Max, okay? And then American dollars, and then we're gonna say save and add another. You can see now it was saved inside our database without a problem, okay? After that, we're gonna go ahead and say OnePlus Pro 10, I think it's called, or OnePlus 10 Pro, I think. So let's see if we can find that. OnePlus 10 Pro. Yeah, let's take this one. Okay, so we have OnePlus 10 Pro. So I'm just gonna copy that here without the 5G. I'm just gonna place it in here, and let's say volcanic black as its subtitle. Its maker doesn't exist yet, so we have to create a maker in here. So let's say the maker is OnePlus, just in one word, like that, save it. And then let's go ahead and grab some images. So we're going to say copy the image address. Let's go to the second image and do the same thing in here. So we say copy image address in here, paste it. Let's go to the third image and do the exact same thing again, copy image address. Okay, and then the fourth and the last image. You can see Best Buy has quite a lot of images, but we just have support for 4 at the moment. We can always extend that in the future if we see that 4 images doesn't suffice. So for the price, we're gonna say 900, and we're gonna say American dollars. That's really good. And then we're just going to press the save button. Now you can see we have 2 products stored in the database. One is a OnePlus and the other one is an iPhone 13 Pro Max. By adding the OnePlus and iPhone 13 Pro Max, we've actually done quite a lot. We've created makers, product categories, and products as well. And we've done migrations, stored all of this inside the database. And I think this suffices actually for this chapter. So what we're going to do is just to go inside our code. So let me bring up Visual Studio Code. I'm going to stop the server in here inside this terminal. We're just going to commit our code. So if you look at the log, we had step 2 previously. And let's just go ahead in here and say git commit step 3. And inside step 3, I'm just going to add products, product category, and maker to products app. Okay, and we're just going to commit this. And if you have a look at our logs, then we can see step 3 in here and some information about what that step 3 actually does. So that was it for this video. We've done a lot. There was a lot of talking, but there was also a lot of stuff that I had to mention. So sorry if it dragged on for a while. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one soon.